Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Salem. And our question tonight comes to us from an Avron, who asks about the word harm in the Wiccan Rede. Now, an Avron's original question is somewhat more elaborate than this, but it boils down to the question of, what does the word harm in harm none mean? Now, different traditions do have different takes on this, and let me begin by saying that the Wiccan Rede is in essence a corollary to the law of Thelema, which comes out of the Renaissance, particularly from the works of Rabelais. And the law of Thelema is do as you will. Do as you will but harm none is an obvious corollary, and is what we normally understand as the Wiccan Rede. When we say do as you will but harm none, what does harm mean? Well, the different traditions have different points of view on this. But the Correllian tradition that I come from would say that the word harm must be understood in the way that it is normally used. Meaning that if in ordinary conversation you would not consider it harm, then it is not harm in terms of the Wiccan Rede. If in ordinary conversation it would be harm, well then it is. Generally speaking, people do ordinarily know the difference. In fact, most people knew by the time they were in kindergarten what was and was not harm in the sense of the Wiccan Rede. May not have listened to it, but they knew because ordinarily their mothers told them. I think that the title, Everything You Really Needed to Know You Learned in Kindergarten, is probably one of the best book titles I've ever heard, and in many cases true. In terms of harm in harm none, to really examine this idea would take a much longer format, but an Avron particularly asks about the idea of veganism. From a Correllian point of view, veganism is certainly a perfectly legitimate choice for a person to make as their dietary lifestyle, but not because of the Wiccan Rede. As pagans, particularly as Correllians, we believe that not only animals, but all things are alive. Not only humans, but all things have souls. A great deal of our ritual year is devoted to commemorating the spirit of the plants, the spirits of nature and the forest. So if we start from the point of view that these things are alive, to say we should not eat meat, but can eat plants, doesn't really make any sense if the idea is that you don't want to eat something that's alive because they're all alive. And it leaves you in the position of having to ask yourself, well, gee, what do you do? Well, obviously Spirit intended that life must eat to survive. And if all things are alive, then everything you're going to eat is also alive, or was previously. Now, Lady Bitterwind, the first elder of the Correllian tradition, who is very formative in my life's thinking, because I've been learning from her since I was very young, celebrates this idea in much of her artwork. If you go to Correllian.com and look at some of the artworks by Lady Bitterwind that you will find deep in the Adventures pages for the most part, or on the Lady Bitterwind bio page, you'll see several of her artworks that deal with the inherent difficulty of the fact that life feeds upon itself. But if all things are alive, there really is nothing else to feed upon. And so ultimately one comes to the point of view that all things in their turn must make their sacrifice, including ourselves. And we can only hope that when it's our turn, we are as gracious as those things that make their sacrifice so that we may survive. One subject that often comes up in terms of the Wiccan Rede is the idea of self-defense. And ordinarily the idea of self-defense would not be considered harm. For example, everyone would agree that it is harm to go up to someone for no reason and hit them on the head. But if someone just hit you on the head and they're going to hit you on the head a second time, if you hit them back, that would normally be considered self-defense, not harm. I personally think it would be irresponsible to let them hit you again. I once had a friend who pointed out to me that because of his ethics, if someone were beating down the door to murder him and his family, he would not be able to defend them, because that would be violence. And my response to that, both then and now, is I think that's terribly irresponsible, particularly to the family members that depend on him for their protection. And when you have people, particularly children, who look to you for protection, you must protect them, and that is not harm. To not protect them would be harm. So it's a very complicated subject, and one could write books and books on it. In fact, books and books have been written on it under various titles. But basically, the Correllian point of view is that it really is a question of whether under ordinary circumstances you would consider something to be harm or not. To take the term and extrapolate it beyond its ordinary usage, we would not consider appropriate. So I hope that helps to answer your question and doesn't actually make the question worse for you. But in the end, there are many differing opinions among the many different traditions. So until next time, may you blessed be.